We all have our favorite boys, and we have our reasons for supporting said boys, but there's gotta be a best boy, right? I may not be the most impartial arbiter for this fate, but I like making lists and yapping about twists. So today we're going to be discussing our lovely sophomores and deciding which of them is the best at NRC using a few criteria. We'll be looking at overall personality, studiousness, and dorm card utility, with each of these factors receiving a score from 1 to 10. With a total of 30 possible points on the board, it's going to be a fantastic battle for Best Boy. However, we do have a few contenders that were also featured in the Best Housewardens video, which also talked about personality and card utility. However, I've updated the personality sections for each and refreshed the card utility bits, so this video isn't going to be a total deja vu. Also, as per usual, there will be spoilers for EN server story content, including talk of vignettes and events, so this is your spoiler warning. With all of that said, let's begin in Heartslable with our teapot tyrant Riddle Rosehearts. I had a hard time pinning down Riddle's personality in the Housewarden video because he just made a lot of sense to me, and that made it hard for me to articulate my points about him. This is still very true, but I think I've gotten a much better argument this time around for my scoring. First and foremost, Riddle is serious, very much so, and while a lot of his nature was crafted by his mother's influence, I do think that Riddle enjoys being serious and forthright. He's actually quite honest, almost to a fault, but this tends to get overshadowed by his focus on the rules and rule following. Riddle holds himself to a high standard, and in doing so, he's not going to let himself slip at all. The rules are just an extension of that, or at least they're the rationale which spawned this tendency, so Riddle's not going to be lying per se without an extremely good reason. While he sometimes places this expectation onto others, he's also not completely unaware either, and can recognize when folks are making a legitimate effort and when they're just coasting on by. But because he's so closely tied to his convictions and is stubborn, it can be impossible to reason with him sometimes. This can lead to the less than ideal situations that we sometimes see him in, but I think without his underlying dedication and earnest nature, he'd be a very entitled and rash individual who I probably wouldn't like as much. He's also got a soft side like we can see with the hedgehogs in Ace's vignette, and he does truly care about those around him like we see in Deuce's dorm uniform vignette. Heck, even Riddle's own vignette story is centered around him helping his dormmates and adapting his approach to doing so in order to best serve them. Riddle is in no way unreasonable, at least post book 1. He's just very stubborn, and because he's both earnest and stubborn, his attempts to help can come off as being very overbearing if not communicated properly. And given that sometimes Riddle busts a blood vessel during this process, I can see how easily his genuine care can be misconstrued by others. Of course, during book 1 he comes off as entitled, however that's rectified very quickly, and then post book 1 Riddle is much more reasonable, despite his lingering flaws. Honestly, given the dorm that he's in and those in it, having this strictness is almost a necessary trait, and I do think it serves him well overall given his other pursuits. I think that during my initial review of Riddle's character, I was unnecessarily harsh, but after coming back to rewrite this section, I'm much more comfortable rating him at an 8. He's not perfect in my eyes, but he's definitely better than some of his fellows, and I think that counts for something. When it comes to book smarts, Riddle's getting 100s on everything, so he's getting a 10 out of 10 here. I don't think I could come up with a rationale to give him any less because this guy is dedicated to his studies and is constantly on the lookout for more information. He's the sole reason that a particular test didn't get a curve because he had discovered a brand new research paper and then incorporated it into his test answers. Riddle does not play around with academics. In fact, he's also the sole reason certain members of his dorm are not failing out of school. For a sophomore to be tutoring a junior means that that sophomore must already have an understanding of that higher level material. So Riddle's basically set when it comes to this. Not only that, but he actively works hard towards his academic goals, as all of his smarts and power was hard won over years and years of prep work and dedication. I'm not sure there's another person in the whole school that can rival him here. Well, perhaps there's at least one, but we'll talk about that later. For now, though, Riddle is getting a 10. In terms of card utility, though, Riddle is a bit mid. His dorm uniform is a very strong all-fire, all-damage attack type card, and if you're going into a Flora battle, he's going to smoke the competition. Unfortunately, in other contexts, he's not so useful because this card is solely focused on damage and has only one element. There's no real utility because it's just meant to burn everything to the ground, so you're not really going to be using it for anything other than that. When I first started the game, this is one of the cards that I really wanted, but now that I have it, I don't use it often, even though it is my second most powerful card in my library. It's just so locked into its use case, and I think that's its greatest flaw. But because it's so powerful in that case, I can't detract too many points from it. So Riddle's card is going to get a 5 here. This means that Riddle's total score in the sophomore pool is a 23, which is not only much better than last time, but also well deserved. Moving into Savannah Claw, we have Ruggie Bucchi, and while it is very easy to meme on Ruggie for just being a broke little guy, that's not the end-all be-all of his character. In fact, he's got quite a lot going for him and is much more resilient than I think he gets credit for, at least at first glance, because he comes off as so laid back. Nothing seems to bother Ruggie, and he'd much rather go with the flow than stand against the tide. It's much easier to make connections that way or score a part-time gig, and Ruggie is very partial to hustling. While he's not going to waste his time cozying up to someone who isn't going to benefit him in the long run, he's still an agreeable guy who doesn't make trouble if he can help it. While he's not as calculated as some other folks, he does have a great work ethic and oftentimes is genuine with others, which I think sets him apart from the other students. Ruggie had a bit of a rough and tumble upbringing, which steered him in this direction, but I don't think he'd be as motivated as he is or as resourceful as he is without those experiences. Even though he's out for himself 99.9% of the time, he can also be considerate and does have his own sort of moral code, which we can see when he brings home all those nearly expired food items to share with the neighborhood kids at the beginning of Book 4. Ruggie's not heartless or ruthless, but he's also not above getting his hands dirty and won't let an opportunity pass by him if he can help it. He's less mindless scavenger and more motivated hustler, which I respect. Ruggie's just a hardworking blue-collar guy who's going to make sure he gets his due, and maybe a bit more. So for the personality section, I'm giving him a solid 8. As far as studiousness goes, Ruggie's not failing. I can't remember a time in the main story or any of the vignettes I have where his grades get discussed specifically. And like most other characters where this is the case, I've just assumed that they're doing well enough that mentioning that they're doing well would be a moot point. This guy's got a great work ethic, so he should be able to work towards his academic goals well too. Given how prestigious NRC is, and therefore how expensive it must be, there's no way that Ruggie is flunking out and messing up this opportunity. At least that was my assumption, since I don't have too much in the ways of supplemental stories, but I did do a bit of digging and my suspicions were confirmed. In Ruggie's birthday boy vignette, he talks about how he really didn't have a good academic background prior to coming to NRC, but with the help of Leona, he's now achieving middling grades. So technically speaking, Ruggie should be middle of the road given those grades. However, I think his drive and determination to make sure he was getting everything he could from his school days, from the part-time gig connections to actual academic support, he should be ranking a little higher. I also agree with Ruggie that his efforts are really impressive, and I think he has every right to be proud of what he's accomplished so far. So for this category, Ruggie is getting a solid 8. In the card department, Ruggie is getting a 0. I hate this card. It always ruins my pity. I cannot get Ruggie to stop showing up during the 50-50, And because it is specifically Mr. Broke Ruggie himself, I am especially upset at the audacity. Jokes aside, this is a very decent defense type Cosmic Water card with an eventual fire spell. It's also another defense card with damage cuts, which means it's not going to be an especially heavy hitter, but it will boost your attack team's HP a good deal. Because this card has 3 different spell elements, it's way more versatile than Riddles, and provides a few more use cases than some of the other Dorm cards with similar cosmic limitations. Plus, the unlockable third spell comes with a boost to evasion, which isn't something I've seen on a card in these considerations before, at least that I can remember. It not only fits Ruggie's character, but it can negate some damage, which could be really nice in defense exams or survival battles. I don't personally use this card much since its buddies are mainly Savannah Claw and my teams are entirely based around Beans, Camo, Floyd, but it's still a nice situational card with decent enough utility, so I'm going to give it a 7. This brings Ruggie up to the grand total of 22 points. Good job. Now then, moving into Octavanel, we'll be starting with yet another housewarden, Azul Ashengrotto. I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. I find Azul to be such a delightful little capitalist being, who also happens to be a deal maker, which is a fantastic combo. However, his schmoozery doesn't come with the same kind of polish as an Ernesto or similarly shady characters. In fact, it's pretty easy to see right through Azul's actions to glean his intentions, and it's honestly kind of refreshing and endearing. Funnily enough, even though I dunk on Leona's motivations in Book 2, I actually found the plot of Book 3 to be the most juvenile, and I think it's because Azul came off as so obviously fake in his dealings. This isn't a demerit as far as I'm concerned. It's actually, again, like I said, very refreshing. And what he lacks in true charisma, he makes up for with meticulous planning. Part of the reason I enjoy Azul so much as a character is because of his determination and his drive. Does he have the purest of motivations? No. In fact, he's powered almost exclusively by spite. However, what he's been able to accomplish with that spite is nothing to scoff at. Contracts or not, Azul is a formidable force with the energy to do whatever it takes to ensure his goals are accomplished, and he doesn't really care what happens to those who get in his way. However, he's very careful about who he does and doesn't cross, and when, which shows that he is not only calculating but intelligent. The boy is constantly weighing odds, solving mental equations, and perfecting each and every step he takes so that no one can challenge him. Of course, there are times where he fails, but even when that happens, it just adds more fuel to his fire and spurns him onwards towards more growth. His attitude is rather admirable, and his interactions with other characters can be really fun. Plus, he usually is able to piece together plots and puzzles better than most of the rest of the main cast, which is nice to see, especially in events. Although I will say it can be a bit bland to have all of his everything be about business 99.9% of the time, and to have the majority of Azul's interactions with other characters be only about business. This can lead to some funny moments, sure, like in Glorious Masquerade, where he has Ruggie and Jamil verbally agree that they chose to be left behind under no duress and would not later seek recompense for the experience. But I do wish there was just a little bit more of the other pieces of Azul shown in some of those other events. But overall, he's delightful, so I'm giving him an 8. Given that Azul puts in the work in other aspects of his life, there is no way that his grades are slipping. So, the only place I can even think that Azul doesn't excel in is PE. But can you really blame a fish for being unable to fly? Well, only if they're a flying fish, which Azul is not, so we can give him a pass. True to his business-minded self, Azul is making sure he's getting on all the teacher's good sides through any means necessary, including studying. When we first encounter him in Book 3, many of his prolific talents in each of the subjects that we observe him in are, in part, obtained through contracts. However, the main plot point of that book is the study guide, which Azul 100% put all of his own effort into. Not only did he put in the work to analyze hundreds of years of test results, he also made sure to frame the whole ordeal in a way that made it impossible to challenge so his true goals could be achieved. It was a well-conceived and cunning plan that worked brilliantly until us meddling kids and our talking cat got involved. But for this consideration, I think it speaks volumes to the lengths that Azul will go to succeed in academics as well as everything else. This isn't an attitude unique to his NRC self either, as we can see in his overblock flashbacks that Azul resolved to study at a very young age, and this is actually what developed his special magic. And we can even see him working 8 times as hard as his peers in that pursuit. Being an octopus certainly helps, but as they are generally bright critters to begin with, but Azul exceeds those expectations and then some, so I'm also going to be giving him a 10 here. For his card, Azul is a defense type, exclusively water card, which does make him situational in the same way as Riddle. At this point, I think most of us are aware of the points of contention regarding single element cards, and while they really shine in their use cases, they don't have a lot of variance in their playstyles. But Azul's got one up on those other ones since his unique attribute is healing. Plus, the unlockable third spell has a curse nullifier for Azul or allies depending on level, which is very useful in cases where you'd likely be using the card. Since Azul's dorm card is focused on defense and has healing, more often than not, you're not going to include it for the duo, you're including it to heal. So having that extra curse nullification can be a game changer in those types of battles, especially when you're using more than one healer. So the more that I thought about this card since my last review, the more useful it became to me. So I'm going to give it an extra point here, bumping it up to a 7. I can't rank it any higher than this because of the single element limitations, but the utility is still great and it is a solid card. All in all, Azul is going to go home with 25 this time around, which is another glow up. Congratulations. So, Jade. Jade is spooky in the most subtle way possible, which makes him even spookier than a normal spooky dude. At least with Rook, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into, but with Jade, you'll be caught in his net long before you even realize it exists, and that's in part due to his subdued and gentle mask. From what we can see, Jade is calm, collected, and thoughtful. He's exceptionally suited for the service industry and has no trouble taking on the role of a butler or manager or whatever you need him to do. Need him to obtain that exclusive shoe? Done. Need him to post a magic hand for you? He's already done it. Need information on all the incoming students in your dorm, including their secret social media accounts, dirty secrets, family ties, and any other sort of information that you could possibly obtain? Jade's got your back. He's a subtle threat, one that works in the shadows, and one who, for all intents and purposes, seems like your average Joe who's just bitten off more than he can chew with Azul and Floyd. In fact, if Floyd wasn't around, I'm not sure folks would trust Jade as much as they do, since having someone to compare him to makes Jade seem even more trustworthy, because, Floyd might steal your textbook on a whim, but Jade would never do that. It's under this precise cover that Jade can do what he needs to. However, if you were to ask him, I don't think that he would be rather honest or forthright about this. He's also not afraid to show his darker side, though. In fact, he even taunts Trey with it in his ceremonial robe vignette, and we can see him talking openly about his dastardly plans in the Ghost Bride event. Beans Day, he's got his own moments, and just on the whole, Jade is not afraid to let frightening comments slip here and there. He seems to relish in taking folks by surprise and seeing their reactions, and more often than not, he does so in a slightly sadistic way, like with the octopus plushie in Harveston. Jade is extremely menacing, but he only ever shows a little piece of himself at any given time and carefully curates a persona that he can show to others, which I think makes him one of, if not the most terrifying character in Twisted Wonderland, at least out of the main cast. But even so, I think it's as delightful as it is necessary given who he is and who he's always adjacent to. So on the personality front, I'm going to be giving Jade a solid 7. Without the sadism, I think Jade would be a bit boring, but having that menacing edge alone also isn't enough for me to rank him higher, despite my bias towards Octavanel, so 7 it is. Where studies are concerned, though, Jade is also a 10 out of 10. I don't think for a second that his grades are slipping with all of the attentiveness he shows in almost all of his actions. He's got a methodical approach that I think rivals that of surgeons when it comes to his work, and he's always one step ahead in his plans, or well, almost always. But the Zoom is technically him, so does that really count? I can't see Jade failing any classes that require memorization or analysis, given how dedicated he is to these two pursuits and other matters. He's able to memorize all sorts of information about Bill, presumably from researching him, which is another point towards Jade's academics. However, Jade is also able to memorize all sorts of complicated scientific names of fungal species and other wild herbs, and he's rather good at reading people, or so it would seem, based off of his special magic, general business dealings, and other senses. I don't remember grades being talked about at any point in time in particular with regard to Jade, but I cannot imagine that he's doing poorly, particularly not with his position as vice housewarden being so technically tenuous, if these three are to be believed at all about their friendship or not friendship. Although, I imagine if he ever stopped enjoying the role that he would just quit, but I doubt he's going to do that anytime soon, just like I doubt he's going to be failing out of school anytime soon. With his terrifying memorization and detail-oriented nature, I feel like I just have to give him a 10 here. Maybe a 9, but I'll settle with a 10, since I feel like he puts in a decent amount of effort, even if that effort goes unspoken. On the card front, Jade's dorm uniform is a defense-type water-fire that has duo with Floyd, unsurprisingly, and it's pretty decent. I don't think this card has ever left my team once after I unlocked the third spell, and while that is almost entirely because of Beansday Floyd, I do think this card has its own legs with which to stand. The stats are a little less impressive than some of the other defense-type cards, but the first spell will give Jade a power boost, which, if used before his duo spell, can be quite useful. The third unlockable spell is Flora, rounding out the elemental roster while also providing a damage cut to foes. With the third spell, this card can go pretty much anywhere and do pretty much anything, and do those things with advantage, potentially, which I think boosts its score quite a bit. I at least like having options and being able to slot Jade into pretty much any team or any context I need it, as he gives a good chunk of HP to the team while also synergizing well with my other cards. Of course, not everyone has an eel with a bean gun, and not everyone wants to revolve their teams around Octave and L, and in those cases, this card probably isn't the best pickup, but it is still generically useful in its utility and its use cases, so I'm gonna give it an 8 here. This means that Jade is getting a total of 25 points. Not bad at all. Last but not least in Octave and L is Floyd. Floyd, boy oh boy, how does one begin to describe a Floyd? This eel is a merman of extremes, although he's not nearly as unpredictable as he seems, at least not to be. Floyd is out for himself, in much the same way as the rest of the Octave and L boys, but unlike the other two, he pursues his desires with little regard to others' feelings, perspectives, or comfort. If Floyd wants to do something, he's doing it, and if he doesn't want to, he won't, and there's very little anyone can do to convince him one way or the other. He's not fickle exactly, he's just a bit indulgent. So if he's feeling down, he'll indulge in being grouchy, and if what he's doing is no longer fun, he'll switch tempos or straight up quit, which can cause chaos for those around him, but that doesn't bother him at all. It's not that Floyd is socially unawares, unlike a certain other extreme someone, he just genuinely does not care. Floyd knows what he's doing is going to ruffle feathers, and he does it anyway, which not only makes him a menace, but a fun menace, and he's got the physical and magical power to back up his actions. When Floyd is in the right headspace or invested in what he's doing, he is a force to be reckoned with. When he's in the basketball mood, he can sweep a game, or when he's in a cooking mood, he can make 5-star dishes, and when he has a passing interest in that wild flora guide Jade lent him, he memorized a bunch of plants and saved us from all being poisoned at Vargas camp. But when he's not interested, all of that focus goes right out the window. This can be rather annoying for others and is what makes Floyd so unpredictable to those who don't know him, but he's not entirely unreasonable. And just because he's out for himself doesn't mean he's entirely cruel, right? Ah well, both Floyd and Jade do have a sadistic undertone going on, but because Floyd is so honest about what he's doing at any given time, and is so in your face with his intentions, he kinda comes off a bit more endearing. He's approachable and fun, and yet at the same time he's dangerous. However, even though you know about the risks, there is a certain charisma that just makes him likable. Floyd is a wonderful blend of chaos and a coin flip of sunshine or darkness, but I think if you took enough time to just understand his motives, you'd be able to predict that coin flip somewhat accurately. Whether you could do anything with that prediction is another matter entirely, but regardless, I think I'll be giving this fish a solid 8 out of 10. He's just such an enjoyable fellow, even if he can be a bit spooky at times, and I just think he's a tiny bit superior to his brother. On the studiousness front, it's a bit of a toss-up with Floyd. Like I mentioned before, Floyd is really good at what he does when he is focused and invested, but if he's not, there's no way he's going to do the work. We can see this clearly demonstrated in his Labor vignette, where Kurel scolds Floyd for not even attempting a quiz and scoring a nice 0, while later, Jade remarks that Floyd scored a full 100 in the last test in that same exact class. It's not a question of if Floyd is studious, it's a question of whether he's going to apply himself to those studies. He's not flunking out of school, but he's also not keeping his grades high either. Plus, he also likes to skip class on occasions if the mood strikes him, so I can't really score him too high here. However, he can also memorize entire books about wild plants and other fantastical feats, so I can't rank him super low either. Therefore, Floyd is going to get a nice middle-of-the-road 5 here. As far as card utility goes, Floyd is a very fun attack-type card with a decent enough stats at max level, and at least a little bit of variety in his spell elements. This card also pairs very well with Jade's dorm uniform in Omni settings, since the two have duo with one another and can cover the elemental gambit with their base spells. Because Floyd is an attack type card, his spells focus on damage output, or at least that's what you would expect. But at max level, his first spell is actually a modest power drain on foes rather than a boost to caster. You only get that ability with his third unlockable spell, so his card is a bit interesting in that regard, and I think this puts him in a more unique place where utility is concerned. With all 3 spells unlocked, you can pick which buff you want while still using duo, since the 2 differing buffs are on the same spell element. Or if you need Floyd to be all fire, he can do that too. This card can't go everywhere, unfortunately, since the elemental spread is still a bit locked in one side of the triangle, but it does have more applications than some of the other single element dorm cards, so I'm going to give it a final score of 7. This means that Floyd is going to get a total of 20 points. Way less than I thought he would get given my bias, but his studiousness really did him in, I think. Now moving on to Scarabia, and oh my, Mr. Ball of Sunshine Kalim, what are we going to do with you? This guy is just bursting at the seams with positivity, and I can confidently say that you will not have anyone else on campus that can compete with him there. While Kalim has had a traumatic past with poisonings and kidnappings and almost being turned into puppetings, I wouldn't blame him for being a bit jaded. However, he's surprisingly not. Kalim instead chooses to see the good in people and holds on to hope no matter how dire the circumstances are. This does come with a side of obliviousness, and Kalim is also purposefully blind to the darker intentions of others. However, I do think that this attitude in general is admirable, so I can't help but feel proud of him for always sticking to this perspective. But this also comes with another pitfall, and that is Kalim being oblivious to the discomfort of those around him based on his own actions. Since he looks at the best in people and hopes upon hopes that they'll be good, I think there's also an assumption that other folks are doing the same thing when they are not. This can lead to some moments where Kalim makes a comment in good faith, but the comment itself is really rude, or he imposes his generosity onto others without realizing it could have negative consequences. This is especially true for his relationship with Jamil, which is a complicated matter we won't be getting into here, but no matter who Kalim is involved with, he's nothing if not consistent with his actions. Even with his flaws, Kalim is just so fun, cheerful, and charismatic. You can't help but like the guy. Last time I gave Kalim full marks here because of this, but after further consideration, I'm not sure that's appropriate anymore. The more I thought about his obliviousness, the more it kinda irked me, and while his determination to never let anything get him down is admirable, imposing on others because of it is less so. I'm not going to deduct very much. He's getting an 8.5, which is still quite high, but he's just not as perfect to me as before. When it comes to studies, though, Kalim is less equipped. The poor guy has very bad grades, and while I'm sure Jamil is an excellent tutor, his lessons I don't think are sticking. Part part of Kalim's academic downfall is due to his devil-may-care attitude and the amount of parties and hangouts and other things that he sponsors. However, part of it is also probably because of Kalim's learning style. We can see in Book 4 when Octavanel steps in that Kalim can study effectively if he's using the right technique. When both his mind and body are active, things are able to stick better. So I think if he applied this method more, his grades might improve. However, as it stands, all we really know is that he's not failing, and even if he was a certain someone, would probably fudge the numbers to keep that sweet, sweet Asim cash flowing in. Regardless, Kalim just isn't a good student and gets distracted very easily, and while that's not really his fault entirely, I'm sure he wants to do well and help his fellows do well. He's just not quite there yet. So for this category, I'm giving him a 4. Kalim's card, however, is a bit more successful in its endeavors as a water cosmic balance card with an eventual third water spell. This card is locked into similar use cases as Riddle and Azul's, but because it has that cosmic spell, it's a little bit more flexible in certain use cases. As far as abilities go, this card also has a bit more utility too, since you can boost the water damage of your allies, or with the third spell, heal. And that third spell at max level will also give a damage cut to foes. These abilities allow Kalim to be used in a variety of situations with a little wiggle room. However, unlike some of the other cosmic cards we've had, the cosmic spell is the duo spell. Because of this, the first water spell is going to be the one that will apply the water buff, and that buff is only to allies, so you're likely only going to be using this card with other water cards, which locks it into use cases where those types of cards are being used in a battle. This is not great, but it's also not the worst case scenario since the cosmic water was kind of already doing that to begin with. But once that third spell is unlocked, you do have a bit more versatility, so I'm going to rate this card at a 7. Good job, bud. That means that Kalim is getting a whopping 19.5. Not too bad, all things considered. Jamil now. Jamil scares me a little bit because he's not quite as subtle as Jade, but he's also still very menacing and powerful. I can also feel the resentment radiating off of him, which puts me on edge because generally folks that harbor resentment lash out at some point, sometimes even towards those that aren't involved. And oh hey, would you look at that? But Jamil is not the sum of his resentment, nor should he be solely defined by it, so let's look at the rest of him, shall we? Jamil is wickedly smart and highly responsible, who was kind of forced to grow up a little fast, I think, and during that process he had to learn how to hide himself from others. This in turn led him to being perceived as just another ordinary guy with no opinions who goes with the flow. Jamil does his best to keep up this image as well, since anything else would put him and his family in hot water. However, we do get to see glimpses of Jamil underneath this cover during Book 4 and the Firelit Sky event. Jamil is capable, smart, and a bit snarky, which is quite delightful when contrasting Kalim's oblivious sunshine. He also is a realist who understands that life isn't fair and that sometimes you have to do whatever you can do to get ahead. So he doesn't really mind playing dirty if it can get him closer to his goal. He'll absolutely lie if it's advantageous, and it seems as though Jamil learned to turn this deception from a means of survival into a powerful weapon. Even now that he's allowed a piece in the spotlight, Jamil prefers to keep himself out of it and is kind of slowly starting to change that attitude, but I do think that he eventually would want to be seen, or at least will be able to be more comfortable in those scenarios, and that's at least my hope. Because beneath all of the lies and deception and subterfuge is a genuinely smart dude who has a huge variety of talents. He can cook, clean, dance, keep Kalim alive, keep Kalim out of trouble, memorize and catalog where any given thing is at any given time, help his doormates make deals that are advantageous, plot extremely well, not just for personal gain, and the list goes on and on. He is an incredible guy that just needs some recognition. So today, I'm going to be giving him a 9, which is just shy of perfect, but it is better than Kalim. So enjoy that while it lasts. For studiousness, I think it would be unfair of me to rank Jamil any lower than a 10 here, but he does purposely tank his grades, so I'm going to purposely tank his score, because we can't have him getting too big ahead now, can we? That said, Jamil is, as previously stated, wicked smart, with a variety of experiences and talents, so he has a lot of practical knowledge to back up his book smarts. We can see this play out in his labware vignette where he applies his cooking knowledge to the alchemy class, at Azul's insistence, which ends up with the pair crafting a successful potion. I think it's also important to point out just how strategic he is with how and where he fails, as we can see him intentionally throwing the Mancala match with enough skill to make Azul question him in Book 4. We also get to see him work with his Soom off of a singular glance to create an entire plan to bore Kalim enough to stop their card game. All of this not only takes smarts but tact, and I would have loved to have given him more than an 8 here, but my hands are tied. As far as his card goes, though, this is one that I don't think I've ever actually used, even though it's in my arsenal. However, it is a Cosmic Fire attack type card with an eventual water spell. The max stats are impressive, and the power stat specifically is decently high for an attack type card, so because of that, the Cosmic Spell ability focuses on reducing foes' damage instead of boosting Jamil. If you want to boost Jamil instead, you're going to have to unlock that third spell, which will also unlock some utility for the card's use cases too. Overall, it seems like it can be a really good addition to your card library, especially if you're a fan of Scarabia, and it does have more than one element alongside the Cosmic, so you could, in theory, take it to many places. However, it's just not the most useful or stellar card in existence, so I'm gonna rate it at a 7. This means that Jamil is getting a total of 24. Last but not least is our gentle sleepy Silver. This guy is such a sweetie, and out of all the more heroic leading folks at NRC, I feel like Silver is the best because he has a softness to him that I think adds to his personality. Silver is soft-spoken, humble, but still firm in his convictions and loyal to those he holds dear. Silver is never going to go out of his way to hurt anyone unless they're actively threatening him, and even when they are, he still takes the time to try to understand their perspective, like we can see in Glorious Masquerade. He's not rash or bold, but he still has the skills to defeat his foes and back up his allies. Given his upbringing, it's no wonder that this is the case, as even though Lilia was a rather tough general, I think Lilia's travels opened his eyes quite a bit to the large variance within folks, and this is something that I believe was passed down from Lilia to Silver. In fact, Silver's ultimate goal is for everyone of every race and creed to get along and to be at peace with one another, which is so wholesome. It's no wonder that the wild animals flock to him and help him out whenever he's got a little problem. Even though he is so wholesome, he's not perfect, and he does have a bad habit of falling asleep whenever and wherever he happens to be. All this is mainly outside of his control. His denseness isn't, and this gets him into trouble quite often. Silver is serious, but to a bit of a fault, as he believes the world to be as earnest as he is, so he doesn't quite suspect people that he otherwise should, and he sometimes ends up in a bit of a pickle because of it. But I think even this can make him very endearing. He's oblivious in a very different way from Kalim, and he does consider others' perspectives and feelings, so I'm going to be giving Silver the 10 this time around. I just find him to be such a lovely little guy, and while he's not the most exciting character on the surface, I do think his convictions and overall nature make him shine bright enough to maybe rival Kalim. When it comes to studying, though, Silver is a bit lackluster. I don't think this is for any lack of trying, and he can and does excel in some areas, but because he falls asleep so often, I have no doubt that he misses key information in classes or just might not be able to finish tests or quizzes, which could result in reduced grades. Sebek even points out at one point that he has better grades than Silver, I believe, and that Silver should take a page out of his book, which, if this isn't just boasting, means that Silver's not doing as well as he probably should be. However, I do think he's trying his best and is doing well enough since he made it a whole year without failing out of school. Plus, I think a little tutoring from Dad every once in a while probably helps as well. Since he's trying his best even though the results aren't spectacular, I'm willing to give Silver a 7 here. It's a bit above average, and I think that fits his efforts in this category. For Silver's dorm card, we have a Cosmic, Flora, and eventual Water Defense type card. The stats are decent enough for this card type, and we've got a damage cut to foes on the first spell, which will help your team tank quite a bit of damage. The Cosmic Spell means this card can go in a lot more places than some of the other element-dependent cards, as we have talked about many times before. And the eventual Water Spell opens up some more opportunities too. The other interesting thing about the Water Spell is that it comes with an evasion boost to caster, meaning Silver may be able to avoid taking damage altogether, which makes this a great card for defense exams or for those tough story battles where you've just got to stay alive for long enough. I feel like this card can be really useful with that third spell, but until it's unlocked, it's somewhat standard as a defense card. However, the evasion ability is still really unique, so I think that will still bump this card up to an 8, meaning that Silver is going to get 25 total points. That also means that each of our boys has received their final grade, and with all of these points tabulated, it's time for us to find out who's the best of the sophomore class. In last place with 19.5 points is Kalim. In 7th place with 20 points we have Floyd. In 6th place with 22 points we have Ruggie. In 5th place with 23 points we have Riddle. In 4th place with 24 points we have Jamil. And with 25 points each, we have Azul, Jade, and Silver tied for first. I don't know how this happened, but it did, and I don't think a coin toss is going to cut it this time. So, we must turn our gaze to the second fairest means of deciding winners: rock, paper, scissors. If you were expecting a wheel spin, fear not, for the wheel shall decide which of our lovely sophomores is picking which option. And once they've been selected, we're going to throw on this rock, paper, scissors simulator to see which of the 3 wins. Whichever gets out first will be in 3rd, and then whoever wins will obviously win. So, let's begin. What's looking? Well, it seems like the inevitable win of paper shall be on us soon. Which means that Silver gets 3rd place, Jade is in 2nd, and our grand prize winner is none other than Azul. Congratulations to Azul for not only winning rock, paper, scissors, but the spot of best sophomore. Do you think that he deserved this win, or do you think that someone else deserves to reign supreme? Please let me know down below, and while you're there, also let me know if you liked this video and want more like it. If comments aren't your style, you can always let me know with a like or maybe even a subscribe. But whatever you decide to do, thank you for sticking around till the end, and remember that you're amazing, and I hope you have a wonderful day.